are there many kids available for adoption here in Australia these days?
I'll give you some scary statistics. And number one, that's the reason that we do not do adoption well, is because of our past practices, which is the stolen generation, as we know,
Right.
and the forgotten kids of the 50s, 60s, 70s, which we handled badly. And there was not a piece in place for post-adoptive support. So a lot of those mothers that had to relinquish those kids were not given any sort of support or counselling.
No.
So they have had ongoing trauma from that experience. Anyway, that's another story, but this is part of the reason why there's a bad attitude around adoption and why it hasn't been championed, so to speak. But the numbers are, at the moment, in foster care in Australia, 18,000 children in foster care needing a family. That means they've been permanently removed from their parents. Last year, 70 of those children were adopted.
Okay, so wait a minute. I mean, look, I myself know a handful of couples who, for whatever reason, were
Don't
not
we
able
all?
to have children. In all cases, they would make very good parents. You're saying there's 18,000 kids who need parents, but what's standing between those kids and all these potential adoptive parents?
Bureaucracy.
Right.
And so that's why, and this year, I'm thrilled to say National Adoption Awareness Week, this year we are fortunate to be corporately backed. James Packer has given us funding to get together. We're going to work on policy, and we would love the new government to be successful on this issue. So we want to work with them, and we want to create policy. It's like the railway system of yesteryear. They're all the different states on a different gauge. It's all like this, and that's what the adoption laws look like. There's no harmonisation, and there's no simple system.
Okay, well, let's just say we could harmonise all the different states when they get the federal government to say this is the new federal law for adoption, it supersedes all state laws. I mean, but is the thinking that, I don't know, that somehow we should entertain hope that these kids who are currently with foster families might be returned to their birth parents? Or?
Well, that's not a part of this 18,000. These are kids that have been abused or that cannot be returned. Look, reunification obviously is number one choice. There's loss involved in the separation of a child with a birth family. It's a terrible thing. But yes, we can try that. But what we've been doing is the best interest of the parent. Waiting for mum to get off crack or dad to stop being an abuser or whatever. It's not the best interest of the child. So we have to step up, and there has to be a regulation where that child has to be protected. And when finally that is done, that they are separate, that it's decided that they cannot go back to the family, don't keep them in the foster care system endlessly, which most of these kids have 6 placements. And that sort of constant change has an effect on their mental health, on their self-esteem. They have no sense of belonging. They have attachment issues. They grow up to be dysfunctional human beings. And the trajectory is incarceration, drugs, all those horrible scenarios. We're taking them out of the system, away from their parents, but then we're not looking after them.
Well, I mean, if there's one thing kids need, it's stability. And whether
permanency.
If it can't be with their own parents, then with some other parents who want to have them. So obviously there's a huge mismatch. I don't know how many couples there are out there who want to adopt kids who can't, but I'm sure it's in the tens of thousands.
I just did another radio show, and there was a talkback, and so many people, we tried, it took 10 years, and what I keep hearing over and over is, we jumped through all the hoops, we did all the papers, and then they lost our papers, and we had to do it again. It needs a champion within government, and we're trying to find that champion that is going to champion this issue, put it on the agenda, and I'm in Melbourne tonight meeting with about 20 CEOs of child advocacy groups. So we're starting the powwows. That's what we're doing. We're bringing, action through connection. We're connecting with the corporates and the community and policy people. We're trying to make something happen.
Now, you've got 2 adopted children yourself. Are they adopted from overseas?
I went to a meeting here in Melbourne, didn't make it to the tea and cookies.
Really? So you couldn't do it in Australia?
Well, it was just a negative experience.
Right.
I could see it was just fraught. All these people sitting in a room are very hopeful, and they were completely turned off. Bronwyn Bishop did the report in 2005. There was an anti-adoption culture, which is pervasive through the system.
Is it any easier overseas?
Yes, in America it was a lot easier. I think the gold class in adoption is South Korea, the Netherlands and Sweden. So I think we need to look to other countries to see what their methodology is and create a system. It's primarily about serving the kids. UNICEF figures 135 million kids classified as orphans. That's the 10th largest country in the world.
Well, of course, sadly, the Philippines, you see a disaster like that. In fact, I read some stats today, 9 million people have been displaced, 4 million of them are children. Sadly, there will be orphans that emerge out of this. And almost angers me is that there are so many, as I said, I know them, there are so many couples out there who would make great parents. There are clearly so many kids, whether they're here or overseas, who need parents, and yet somehow
and we can't get them together.
There's a bureaucracy that says we're just going to make this as difficult as possible.
And that's what we've got to work on. And the saddest thing is that that's why I keep saying it's so urgent, because every minute that child is not with their permanent family is having a profound effect on them. There's damage being done. And that's why with Adoption Awareness Week, we through Paul Newman Foundation and Keels, funded us for education. We've just brought out Dr. Karen Purvis from America, who does this trust-based relationship intervention, which is an absolute imperative piece of the adoption, the post-adoptive piece. These kids are coming from trauma. Any child that's separated from a birth parent is suffering trauma. So she's educating the families that care for these kids to understand their journey and support them.
Have you had much contact yet with the federal government, the new federal government?
Wednesday we're going to do the press gallery in Canberra.
Right.
And I'm meeting with George Brandes, yes, new Attorney General, and I don't know how many other men in suits.
men in blue ties.
Men in blue ties. Not sort of my arena. I'm like more the art, so it'll be a whole different experience for me.
Look, if people want to see you talking, I think tomorrow you're going to be at the Wheeler Centre here in the city at 8 a.m. Sally Warhaft is hosting a thing called the Fifth Estate, and people can make a booking. It is free, but you do need to make a booking at wheelercentre.com. So, Deborra-Lee Furness, in the next few years with National Awareness Adoption Week, is there a chance this whole process will become less bureaucratic, less cumbersome?
This year, our slogan is let's double the numbers of kids and let's halve the amount of time. So that's what we're going for, and I'm hoping within a year. I really feel we've been at this for 5 years, and people say, "Oh, it's a long time." But when you look at decades of bad practice, 5 years to change a system, we're getting somewhere. I feel this year is a tipping point. I think the community beyond the adoption community is listening, and everyone's sticking up for the child. We're thinking of the kids.